Calligraphy has brought this delightful and inspiring exhibition to the Dixon for all of Memphis to experience. I really feel like this show provides the joy and just kind of happiness that we all need right now. So when Kevin first mentioned the idea of bringing the St. John's Bible to the Dixon, I'm kind of now embarrassed to admit that I had never heard of it. But as soon as I dug into the project, I was hooked. I had studied historic manuscripts in college and graduate school, and I loved the idea of an illuminated manuscript for the 21st century. As soon as we signed on to be a venue for this exhibition, Tim Ternes came down to Memphis to give our staff an overview of the St. John's Bible itself and the exhibition. Our whole team was fascinated. We really hung on his every word. And afterwards, I took Tim to the now late great Grove Grill for some pimento cheese and shrimp and grits, and we became fast friends. So Tim, thank you for your continual patience with me and my questions in the years, months, days, and yes, even hours before the opening of this show. I have kind of come to think of Tim as Saint Tim of Minnesota.
Oh dear.
So here's a little bit about Tim. Tim Ternes is the director of the St. John's Bible and the Hill Museum and Manuscript Library, or HIML as it's known, in Collegeville, Minnesota. Tim worked closely with the artistic team in the creation of the original works and facilitated planning and communications between the artists and the commissioner. This has given him extensive behind-the-scenes knowledge and really great stories about all aspects of the project. In addition to caring for the original folios of the Bible, Tim curates the on-campus exhibition program for the Bible and HIML's rare book and art collections. He also travels extensively throughout the country, or at least he did before the pandemic, offering presentations and educational programs for the St. John's Bible Project and library collections. In short, Tim is the keeper of the pages and the keeper of the story. And I should mention that while Tim is speaking, if questions come up, please you'll move your mouse down to the bottom center of your Zoom screen and hover over the word chat. And if you click on that, a little box will pop up and you can type in your questions there. Lindley Schmidt, who manages all of our public programs here, Lindley will read the questions, as many of them as possible, at the end of Tim's lecture. And Tim tells the St. John's Bible story so well. We are all in for such a treat today. So I know you all join me. If we were in the room together, you would hear the applause, but I know you all join me in welcoming Tim Ternes. Welcome, Tim.
Well, thank you, Julie. What a very nice introduction, and thank you to everyone. I had the pimento cheese when I came down to visit you. You come on up here, we'll give you some lutefisk. How does that sound? Trust me, it's not the same. There's no way you'll enjoy it as much. So, good afternoon, everyone. Well, you'll have to eat it holding your nose. It's that bad. So, but good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to my kitchen up in Minnesota. It is such a strange thing. As Julie said to you in my introduction, normally I would be in front of you on a stage or traveling all over the place. In fact, I canceled 14 flights in the month of March and April alone. And I had nothing on my calendar going forward. It's such a strange thing to realize that I won't be traveling. But, that's what we travel now in a very differently. We have virtual tourism as we go all the way through. So, well, again, welcome this afternoon. And you're here to hear a good story. A story that starts right here in the middle of Minnesota. I'll show you where I am. You can see that little red dot over here. Right there is the middle of Minnesota. It is home to Collegeville, Minnesota, which is home to St. John's Abbey and University. There is a picture of where I am. I work in the most beautiful place on the world. It is 2,700 acres of woods and wetlands and lakes and absolutely gorgeous. Right now, it is, like you, all orange and yellow and red. I wish I had a picture of the fall here because it has been truly spectacular. And in the middle of this state, if you threw a dart in the middle of the state, you would find this place called St. John's Abbey. It is home to about 160 Benedictine monks. And 5 miles away, about 330 Benedictine sisters. So these are two massive communities. These are monasteries that have been around for 160 some years, but in that monastic tradition that's about 1,500 years old. They are all members of what's called the Order of Saint Benedict. And I tell you this because the Order of Saint Benedict has a charism that is about doing everything to its highest quality, about creating things that are here to last for longevity, about a sense of welcoming and inclusion and a sense of forward thinking that really defines almost every decision that they make. Even when it came down to designing our campus had to reflect that sense of welcome, hospitality, and forward thinking. Here's a good example. This is the Abbey Church that sits right in the middle of the campus. This stunning building, which can be seen, the bell tower can be seen 5 miles away, was opened in 1961. And if you close your eyes and picture a Catholic church, you probably won't picture one that looks like this inside, especially in 1961. And in 1961, when this church opened, it was a shock to the world. But I show you this because it tells you and it gives you the idea that these monks and these sisters in the middle of Minnesota have for their whole existence been thinking ahead of themselves. And everything about this building, when you walk into it, says it's a building of quality. It's a building of longevity. It's meant to be here. Everything about it is about welcoming you into the space and remembering that this is a communal experience as well, and ahead of its time and forward thinking. And all of those things guide the decisions we make, and all of those things guide the story you're about to hear. And it's an interesting story because this thing called the St. John's Bible, this thing that we've become so famous for. I mean, I've been on the Today Show with the St. John's Bible. I mean, that morning it went Sting the rock star, followed by Tim the St. John's Bible, followed by Martha Stewart. Trust me, it was a very strange show that morning. But so we have become famous for this thing called the St. John's Bible. And people do not realize that this thing is something we never thought about doing, never wanted to do, and will never do again. It's one of those things, had we known what we know now, we never would have done it. We're very proud of the fact that we did do it. And the story of the St. John's Bible actually wasn't our idea. It begins with this man right here. This is Donald Jackson. Donald Jackson is a world-renowned calligrapher. He is by profession the senior scribe of the Royal House of Lords. It is his job to write things that Queen Elizabeth hands out. And the story of the St. John's Bible is Donald's story because he's really considered probably the world's foremost Western scribe. And it was his idea. He had wanted to handwrite a Bible since he was a child. And he finally came to St. John's and he saw our church in 1981. And he said, any community that would commission the building of this church in the 1960s would understand something as ridiculous as handwriting a Bible in the 21st century. And he said, that's when I knew they would do it. And he let that idea percolate in his mind for 14 more years until 1995, when Donald Jackson came to St. John's and he simply asked the community, what are you going to do to mark the millennium? It was 5 years away. We hadn't even thought about that. And he said, I've got an idea. How would you like to commission the handwriting of the Word of God, doing it in a way that any medieval monk or medieval calligrapher would recognize, but not make a medieval book, make a book for the 21st century? Well, like any church organization in the world, it took us 3 years to give him an answer. Nothing goes quickly in the church world. But that kicked off 3 years of intensive discussions, planning, fundraising, and all the things you can imagine to get a project off the ground. Finally, in 1998, we officially signed the contract, which allowed Donald to say, okay, it's time to do it. I've got the talent, I've got the vision. What I don't have, and I now have the money, what I don't have is, of course, the time. And so that allowed Donald to put together a team of 23 artists and individuals, and here's their group picture, that would work for the next 15 years to make this one work of art. So what's on display right now at the Dixon is the collective work of 23 artists over 15 years to make one beautiful work of art. And the original pages that they wrote, that they designed, that they did beautiful artwork on are in that gallery right now. This team of people from all over the United Kingdom, with 3 exceptions. There's Diane from Minneapolis. There is Suzanne from Washington State and Thomas from California. The rest are from the United Kingdom. These are the scribes, the artists. These are the people who prepared the pages that the artists are going to write on. These are the people who drew the pencil lines so that the artists could write straight. These are the people who erased the pencil lines around every letter, millions of letters. These are the people who collectively worked to make this one work of art. And this photograph was taken on the very last day of the project. And it was the first time they were ever all in the room at the same time. Well, almost. You can see here, Brian is a paper cutout. They carried him around that day because he couldn't make the party. So they've never even all been in the room at the same time. So this project began with a childhood dream of Donald Jackson. He found a commissioner. He now had some talent, which gave him the time. So now they had to begin their work. Every one of these artists created the St. John's Bible in a way that any medieval scribe would recognize today. They used the most traditional tools, methods, and materials because, again, just like the church, they're going for longevity. So they used things that were guaranteed to last. And so what we'll do now is we're going to unpack some of the minutiae of that before we get into the actual pages and see it, because how it is made is as fascinating as what was made. And the very first thing they had to deal with was this. I know you can't see it very well, but you'll see it close up in a few seconds. This little tiny thing that I'm holding, this little black thing, if you listen carefully, you can hear it, it's hard. This little black thing is the most prolifically used thing in the entire project. It is the entire project, basically. This is the ink. This is the ink for the St. John's Bible, and it's very special. The ink for the St. John's Bible, because remember, what they did is they hand wrote the Bible. The ink is very special, and it covers every single page. Number one, the ink is old. It was made in China in the 1870s. And number two, which makes it fascinating, Donald Jackson, this man who came to us in 1995 to see if we wanted to help him, actually bought the ink for the St. John's Bible 45 years ago. He came across a place in England that was going out of business, and they had these beautiful black ink sticks, and they were selling them for pennies a piece. And he picked them up and he looked at it and he said, "These are exceptional. They were made in the 1800s. We don't make this kind of ink anymore. I'm going to buy all they have just in case I get to do my project." He's been thinking about this for decades. Well, had Donald not bought the inks for the St. John's Bible 45 some years ago, we couldn't afford them today. This little stick of ink I'm holding in my hand, the one you see on the screen in front of you here, sells for over $1,000 a stick nowadays. He bought them for pennies a piece. So why? Why would something like this be so expensive and valuable? Well, it's what it's made out of. This, and I'm not kidding when I tell you this little black stick of ink is actually a stick of candle smoke. I'll repeat that again. It's a stick of candle smoke from the 1870s. Light a candle at home sometime today, let it burn for 3 or 4 hours and blow it out and let your hand be hit by the smoke. When you lift your hand will be black because that is soot. That is carbon. That's pure carbon. And a very common way to make ink in the 1870s would be to collect ink or collect carbon, from burning things. And then you would mix it with gum arabic or bone gel. And that would create the stick of ink, as you see here. And then when you're ready to use it, as you see over here, you put it on your grinding stone and you grind with a little bit of water. And that black soot will stain the water black as all that glue, whatever else you have in there, melts away. Dip your pen and write your words, the water evaporates, and the soot is held to the page. And think about that. That's important because this has already been through fire. It's already been burned. It's not going to break down. It's not going to fade. Those black letters will stay as black as they are today, as they are in 500 years as they are today. The soot is very stable. Now, a charcoal briquette will stay black for centuries. This material has proved itself. And the colored inks are just as beautiful. The reds are solid cakes of vermilion. The blues are ground lapis, and the greens ground malachite. And they were also made in the 1800s. And they are truly gorgeous materials that will not break down any further. And with the warm colors, you take an egg and you mix the egg yolk. With the cool colors, you take an egg white and you mix the egg white with it. And that will keep those colors looking wet and vibrant and stable on the page for centuries to come. Once again, we're thinking in terms of centuries. The St. John's Bible will have a shelf life of about 1,500 to 2,000 years because of the decisions like this that were made. And we're not trying to recreate the past with this. We're using this because there's no better way to do it today. So you've got this beautiful ink. You need something with which to write. Now, I could very easily pick up this pen and start writing the Bible, and it wouldn't probably take that long, but it wouldn't be quite as nice. The St. John's Bible, the scribes in the St. John's Bible went back to tradition, not again to recreate the past, but because they wanted something that really worked well. And they wrote the Bible with a turkey, a swan, and a goose feather, or a goose feather. They chose the quill because it becomes a natural extension of the hand. And what I'm holding in my hand right now is really a movie set quill, or a TV quill. Quills never looked like this. Look at any medieval painting, you'll never see all these fluffy, feathery things on there. You will see this. This is a real quill. And to make a quill out of a pen, or a quill out of a feather, you take all these barbs off, you strip them off like this and rip them down, and then you have to bake this in sand because this is really soft. You hear how soft that is and how it cracks? Yeah. You never write with this. So you have to turn this into a pen by baking it in sand because this is like your fingernails. You heat sand up for about 350 degrees, then you bake this in there for about 2 minutes and it hardens. Hardens so much so that when you try to bend it and crack it, it won't do it. It clarifies it and makes it so hard so that you can take a pen knife and make about 12 to 15 cuts at the bottom of the pen, and you get the most perfect tool for writing. Look here, and you can see how that quill has been shaped into the traditional look of a pen tip. And they use that because it becomes an extension of the hand. And that clarified pen, after it's been baked, will last for centuries. Donald Jackson wrote his part of the Bible with a quill that was about 135 years old. And every once in a while, you have to kind of resharpen it and make it work for you again. But this beautiful, simple tool. So you've got ink, you've got the perfect pen, you've got your talents. What's missing? Something on which to write. And I saw Julie mouth paper as you go up. Well, here it is. This is the paper for the St. John's Bible. And of course, we're not writing on paper because paper's not going to last 2,000 years. We're going to write on something much more durable. And it sounds plasticky, and here it is. The St. John's Bible is written on beautiful sheets of calf skin vellum. Now, the word veal comes from the Latin word vellum. And so that's why we have calf skin. And before anyone gets mad at me, we did not kill a bunch of baby cows for the Bible. We do not have a herd hidden behind our Abbey Church branded Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, and so on. These all come from veal production in the United Kingdom. And I show you this because here's a piece that I carry around with me, but I've also carried around this piece with me. And this is the one I hand around to audiences and say, try to rip it. And about 2 million people have taken this piece and tried to rip this piece in half and try to create, and it is still there. It's a lot floppier than it was when it started, but you can see this is unbelievably durable. And that's the main reason you use this vellum, because it will last for centuries. And if you look carefully, look at here, you can see the veining of the calf. You can see where it was attached to the body. You can also, when you feel it, feel the inside and outside of the cow, because it's stretched and soaked in lime and water, and then it's sanded so that you can write on both pages. You are making a book after all, so you have to be able to turn the pages. And as I've said, this beautiful calf skin, which is we're using about 300 sheets of this. This will make sure that we have a stable surface for centuries. But it also allows one other very important thing to happen. It allows the scribes to be human. I'll keep that in mind, because you'll see it later on. This really is an important element. It allows the scribes to be human. And that's important because the scribe really is human. And he or she is going to, do things that might not be expected of them. And the tools, methods, and materials I just showed you would be recognized by any medieval scribe we could bring back to life today. Take a look. Take a look at this image of St. Dunstan copying the Rule of St. Benedict from the year 1170. Look at the quill. Look what he's writing on. Look at how he's sitting. any medieval scribe would recognize every single thing we're doing today. And I love this next slide because of the close-up. It shows you, look at this beautiful slide. It shows you what an artist's hand can do with an old turkey feather, some candle smoke, and a cow skin. And if that doesn't impress you, I'm sorry, you are unimpressible. It's as simple as that, because it's incredible. When you go to the Dixon and when you look at the pages in the cases and you get up close, remember that these are pages written by the human hand. And tonight, at home, take out a piece of paper and write down one word on that paper and try to have other people copy it the same way and make it look just like you did. It's very hard to do with modern materials. And then imagine doing that with cows, turkeys, and candle smoke. So we have this amazing collection of artists. They have these very traditional tools and materials. What's the next thing we need to move this forward? Scribes don't author. Calligraphers don't write the story. Calligraphers copy the story. And so they needed a text to copy. They needed a text to write. And that was the biggest decision we had in the entire project, because almost always, whenever someone hears that this is a handwritten Bible or a Bible period, one of their first questions is, yes, but what translation did you use? Because this is not a new translation of the Bible. We did not redo the words of the Bible. We used a traditional translation, but we wanted a translation that was inclusive, that was literal, that was scholarly, that was in English, that was approved for use in the Catholic Church. We're a Roman Catholic order. We wanted to be able to use it, but we also wanted it to be used by as many other traditions as possible. So this truly was the most difficult decision we had, because if we got it wrong, the first thing people would say was, oh, that's not for me. So with all those things in mind, we chose to go with the new revised standard version, or what's known as the NRSV more commonly. And the NRSV is important for us in this case because the NRSV is a literal translation, it's a scholarly translation, it's an inclusive translation. It's approved for use by the Catholic Church. But the main reason we chose the NRSV is because it has the distinction of being one of the only translations of the Bible in English that is officially approved for use by almost every major Christian church worldwide. And therefore, it's become the most perfect choice for us because now we have people coming across all types of traditions to use it and see it. And it is gorgeous. And the main reason that NRSV, that quality is important is because it reminds us that the Bible by itself is meant for everyone. It's a communal thing. In fact, because it's communal, we wanted to make a book that was communal. And so the next big decision was, how do we make something that's typically like this available to everyone? And that was simply by size. The St. John's Bible is big. As you're taking a look at this image, you'll see a couple of guests looking at a page of the St. John's Bible in our gallery in Minnesota. And you can see by its very nature, the Bible is big. It's meant to be a communal book. And because of its size, because there are over 4 million letters in the St. John's Bible and about 890,000 words, it couldn't be one book. It would be impossible for it to be one book because the first time you'd open it, it would fall apart from its own weight. You'd never be able to lift it. So the St. John's Bible is divided into 7 different volumes. And this list here is a standard breakup of the Bible. The St. John's Bible is the Old and New Testament, all 73 books of the Bible. Of course, it includes the apocryphal books that many traditions use. Some traditions leave those out, but it includes the apocryphal books as well. And this breakdown of the Bible is really what's been used for centuries. You may not be familiar with this being separated, but many traditions, of course, put the Psalms as part of wisdom books, but the Psalms are often put in their own book because they're used every single day. Actually, in a monastery, you would read the Psalms about 5 to 8 times a day. And so it's pulled out into its own separate book called a Psalter, as you go kind of this way. So we have this amazing book of 1,130 some handwritten pages. And when you go to the gallery, please spend as much time looking at the writing, because every written page is a work of art, as you do the artworks, because it is truly stunning in that respect. And we'll talk a little bit more at the end about the written page. But now, the St. John's Bible may not be a new word translation, but it is a new visual translation. And that's where we want to get into what you're going to see at the gallery and how you can engage with it a little bit more. 1,130 handwritten pages, and over 160 of those pages have artworks. Beautiful artworks that are designed to unpack the scriptures in a very different way. But to understand how this is different than its medieval predecessors, let's take a look at how it might have been handled in the medieval period or in centuries ago when it came time to make a religious book or a religious work of art and to show it. If you think about it, when it comes to religious art, most religious texts, manuscripts, and even artworks have been about this word. They have been illustrated. Now, think of the word illustrated. What kind of things do we illustrate nowadays? Directions, manuals, cookbooks, things like that. Children's books are often called as illustrated. And what is the purpose of an illustration? It's to convey a message, to convey a single idea, or maybe a series of ideas. An illustrated work is about your role as the viewer, because your role as the viewer is to get the message of that illustration. That's why directions are very clear. You know, if you buy something from IKEA, you're going to get directions without a single word in them, just a bunch of pictures. And if you don't follow those pictures correctly, you're not going to get a bookshelf or a Bjork or a Glugelhof or whatever they call it. You're not going to get that thing. It's going to be something different. And for centuries, the idea of a sacred text was to always illustrate it because, of course, much of the population couldn't read it. And it was important that you got the illustrated single meaning. And that meaning would have been dictated or decided upon by a single person, a small group of people, or those that we would say are the experts. No, there's nothing wrong with that. That's how, for centuries, many texts and many things, even still today, are done that way. However, if we're going to make a Bible for the 21st century that is about forward thinking and welcoming as well as quality and longevity, the word illustrated might not serve us. So take a look at this word. Now, what comes to mind when you see that word? Illuminated. Almost always the first word that comes to people's mind is light. Okay? And what happens when you shine a light on something? You can see it. And in fact, you might see things you didn't see before. And the nice thing about illuminating something is you can kind of see it all the way around. And it allows you to see things that maybe someone else didn't see. And so when it came time to the St. John's Bible, we did not want to make a picture book. We did not want to make an illustrated Bible. We wanted to make a Bible that was designed to illuminate the words, to allow you to come in to create meaning. And the best way to create meaning is with other people. And you get that many views looking at the thing together. So let's take a look at this concept and see how it might play out if you're doing an illuminated Bible today versus an illustrated Bible. So let's take a simple story. Creation. A simple story like creation. Now think about that. Almost everyone knows a story of creation, even if you've never read the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, or maybe you've never read any of, or maybe one of those is your favorite book and you know it very well. Almost every tradition has a creation story. I could stop strangers on the street and ask the stranger, how many days are in the traditional biblical creation story? And there's a good chance that person would say 7. I could stop the next person and say, who were the first people according to biblical tradition? And there's a good chance they've heard of Adam and Eve. The creation stories are as much about popular culture as religious culture today. And for centuries, if you opened a Bible, you might see a creation story like this. Now that's a very, very well-known image of the creation story from the Bible Morale. It is God the architect. And there's no question about this, what it's meant in this image. God is the architect of the world. God is physically creating the world. Take a look at a different image, okay, from the 15th century. Again, we have a very similar image. God is architect. God is physically doing it. And what's also interesting in this is look at who is defined as God in both of these images, even centuries apart. It's very clear who God is. It defines God. Well, will this cut it in the 21st century? Because how do we make a Bible in the 21st century that says, weave in modern science, weave in modern values, make it literal so we know it's creation, but also make it prophetic so that in 500 years from now, people know it's creation? And how do you deal with the picture of God today? Because, I don't know, my image of God might not look like this or this. And the minute I create an image of God, I've already said to this half of the audience, oh, we don't care about you, because we know in your tradition you don't make an image of God. And oh, this part over here says, well, you know what? This is what God looks like. I know for a fact. Okay. This person over here says, oh, but you can't ever do that because there is, God is in the atmosphere, or whatever. How do you do that so that the minute you create an image, you don't turn off half your audience? And you keep that idea of welcome along with quality. Because we also don't want to make our theology pablum. We don't want to make it watered down. And that's the challenge that we give our artists. Now we have a few people that you can see on screen today, and we're going to ask them to unmute, and they're going to play the role of you. Let them be. So we've got Julie, I think, and Phil, and I think Kevin is coming back on, and Lindley, and they're going to be our little tour, because I'm going to now show them some of the artworks in the St. John's Bible, and we're going to look at creation, and I want them to react to the creation image that they're seeing, just as you might be doing at home if you were in a small tour group as well. So with all this in mind now, here is creation centuries ago. What could creation look like today? I'm going to show you the image of the St. John's Bible, and here it is, creation in a new form. Now just everyone take a look at this. Ask yourself, what do you see? Don't answer anything yet. Just look at it and let it sink in. Let your eyes wander all over it. You're looking at a very different image of creation than you would have seen in the Middle Ages. I've looked at this so many times, and I still find it fascinating to look at it myself. So my friendly panelists here, what's the first thing that strikes you whenever you see this image? What stands out to you? Anyone?
I'll go. I think the bird that's in the center, the bird figure that's in the center of the image is what kind of pops out at me first.
Why does that strike you, Julie?
I don't know. I guess it kind of draws your eye, gives your eye something to focus on, with the rest of the image being kind of, broken into bands. Mm-hmm. I guess my eye was first kind of drawn to that.
Yeah, very much so. It's a huge contrast to everything else happening in there as well. Anybody else? What else strikes you when you look at this image?
I always first become aware of, for me, the left side of it with just the explosion. Looks like just an explosion of color, and there are all kinds of jagged shapes that aren't present in the rest of the panels or the columns.
Interesting, because Julie talked about the contrast of the bird shape and the lines, and you're actually talking about a contrast between one side and the other. This is nothing over here is over in this area. Interesting. Any other comments from people? What strikes you?
Yeah, I think it's the thing that I see is just these really strong verticals, that march rhythmically across the page. And, when I look at it, that the bird almost seems to be hovering over it rather than a part of it.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, because of that contrast of the verticals and that kind of that softer image of the bird, it does make an interesting. Now you talked about, I think, rhythmically, Kevin. What gives you a rhythm in this piece?
Well, I think it's the demarcation of the verticals, and the fact that the one vertical is very different from the other as you march across the page. I mean, I naturally read from left to right, and the fact that there is this very dynamic, almost chaotic panel on the left, and then you move across to a sort of a more orderly image when you get to the right.
Interesting, the choice of words. You mentioned chaos or chaotic, and you mentioned order. Have any of you ever read this passage in the Bible? I bet Phil has. Yeah. Chaos and order are two words that come up a lot in that passage of the Bible. So take a look at this. If you're a person who knows tradition or knows that story, what does it say about to you as you look at this piece?
Well, I was struck by the contrast between the left side that Lindley pointed out that's very chaotic, and how calm and peaceful the right side is with the gold and the yellow, but it seems very peaceful compared with the other side.
Yeah. How does that, what kind of message does that give you? Let's take a look at this. Anyone? What's the artwork trying to say to you?
Well, one side of it looks so chaotic, and then the opposite end looks so calm.
Mm.
And it looks like it's marching toward that, because that tan color is repeated in so many elements of the other verticals.
Yeah, sure. Is there anything that you're looking at that you see that kind of strikes you as, or puzzles you, or you think, oh, that's interesting? Any element you see in the artwork?
I kind of have the thin gold band that's on the left side, on the chaotic end on the left, kind of makes me think, makes me wonder what it is a little bit.
Anyone have an idea? Why would that gold band be there? And look how it's in the midst of that chaos that Kevin and Lindley pointed out. What might be going on here?
Well, it might suggest that there is order even in chaos. There is a
Nice.
a plan. I mean, I see it. I tend to see that left panel as it could be read lots of different ways. It could be the Big Bang. It could be, it could be, it could be the creation of life out of a void.
Sure.
But it could also be something more scientific even.
There you go. And we did say to our artists, weave in modern science and values. And so you have that almost as if, oh, maybe this is the starting point.
That strikes me as an excellent example of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nicely put. Is there anything that anybody else wants to comment on as we look at this?
The letters that are on the left side.
Yeah, let's zoom into those. Now, I know Phil reads that language, but maybe some of us don't. For those of us who don't read it, what could it say? What could it mean? Because they're in the bottom there. You see them? Right there they are. What's going on there? Why are there letters in the midst of all this chaos? Then there are these beautiful letters right in the middle of it.
Well, we have someone in the audience, Mary Miner, says it just went away.
Oh.
Says in the beginning.
Yeah, there you go. Very nice. Could be in the beginning. In the beginning was the word. And it starts. Now, would you like me to tell you some things about this as we're sitting here, or would you like to continue talking about it yourself?
I would love to hear more.
Okay. With your permission, I will unpack this for you a little bit. And I ask your permission because the St. John's Bible is not meant to be a didactic picture book. They're meant to be invitations in for you to come together with others to have conversation. And in the audience we have here today, we have theologians, we have museum directors, we have people with PhDs, and we have people like me who taught elementary school for 17 years. And those conversations are, and all those perspectives are very important to a conversation. But because we're human, we're nosy, we like to know what the artist was thinking. With your permission, I'll tell you a little bit about it and unpack it with you as well. If you go back and take a look, most people look at this and they see 7 slices. 1 slice for each day, the story unfolding. You beautifully talked about this, Kevin and Lindley, about being chaos. That mess of that whole mess. In the midst of that chaos, you have that sense of order. The reading of the word tohu vabohu, which in Hebrew loosely translates into formless void or nothingness. But then, Kevin, when you mentioned the fact that there's order in the midst of that chaos, take a look at these. Those are mathematical fractals. Fractals use, or mathematicians use fractal geometry in chaos theory. You can use fractals to mathematically calculate how a tree branch is going to grow. In the midst of the chaos, there's an underlying sense of order about to be brought forth. And then you do have that big burst of energy, possibly the Big Bang, something moving all the way through. And what's interesting is this is the only strip that isn't contained. I love how this one just kind of jumps out all over the place. And then you have that moment in scripture where God says, let there be light, and boom, that thin band of gold shadows the darkness, kind of starting the whole process as you go about ahead of it. Then you have the creation of the heavens and the seas. And then you have a separation of the land and the sea in the third day. Remember we said weave in modern science? That's a satellite image of the Ganges River Delta with a hint of vegetation at the bottom. Sun to rule by day and moon to rule by night and all the stars in between. And did you notice these orbits? Again, a bit of science. These planetary orbits. Had Donald Jackson, or any artist for that matter, put them in a Bible 800 years ago, the church would have locked them away in prison. We understand that we don't revolve around the sun. This is, we don't revolve around the earth, we revolve around the sun nowadays. And then you've got this strip here in the fifth day, where you've got the creation of birds and creatures of the sea. And if you zoom in and take a look at those fish, these fish here actually come from the mosaic floor in the Church of the Multiplication in Tabgha, Israel, the church upon which that historically the miracle took place. And then you have that creation of human beings. And these humans are really quite wonderful. In fact, one of them is very important. Right there, she is. This is an image of a huntress, and she graces the first page of the St. John's Bible. Centuries ago, many of you on the audience today wouldn't have been imaged in a work like this because you're women. But in the modern day, we understand the equality of men and women. And so we have a huntress that comes from a cave painting in Nigeria, one of the oldest images of a woman we have on the planet. And she is joined with other traditional figures from rock paintings and so on. And if you look carefully, those people are also joined with the little troublemaker down there, the little tiny hint of what's to come, a very poisonous snake wrapping around the feet of the people down there. And remember, the snake wasn't part of the 7 days story. That's the Adam and Eve story. So the snake or the serpent is giving us a foreshadowing of what's to come. But then everything gives way to this day of peace, order, rest, as Phil talked about, the contrast on the other side over here as well. Now, in all the comments that the four of you made, not one of you mentioned where you see God. Because remember those images I showed you at the beginning of the creation, the traditional creation images? They had a very clear picture of who God was. And as my college students always say, every time you look at an old manuscript, you see all you can come away with is God was a hairy old white man. And that doesn't really cut it today, does it? So how do we deal with creating an image of God? Because we told our artists we had to make God or show God. So where's God in this artwork? Any of you have any ideas?
Could it be the bird?
Ooh. Why would you say the bird, Lindley?
Because the dove is shown so much as the Holy Spirit.
Oh, there you go. Now, as I always point out, no matter where I am, but I don't know about you, but in Minnesota, doves are white. They may be in Tennessee, they're dark blue. I have no idea. But why is that dove or bird so dark blue?
Could it be a shadow of a bird?
Ooh, nice. And I think it was Kevin that talked about something hovering over or watching over us. That'd be very nice. Very nice. Any other ideas? The idea of God is a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
And we decided early on that we would not make a picture of God. But we would show you the presence of God. So what's the only thing you see present in every single day in the stripes? What's the only thing that's present every single time?
The gold square?
Ah, look, yeah, very good. You see those? I zoomed in. Here are the gold squares. Take a look at those gold squares. Talk about every single thing those gold squares do. What do they do in the artwork? You see them here?
They seem to connect all of the different sections.
Like they're almost like little hinges, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
What else do the gold squares do?
Count. And then
Mhm.
count the days.
1, 2, 3, and so on. Any other ideas?
Sort of mark the boundaries.
Ah, yeah. So they count, they move you forward, they hinge it together, they mark things off. Did you also notice that they go 7, 7, 7? What do they form?
Triangle.
Yeah, and in many cultures, a triangle is a Trinitarian image. So it was decided early on that we wouldn't show a picture of God, but we would show God's presence using 24-karat gold, which gives us the word illumination. The word to illuminate truly means the play of light on the precious metal as you turn the page. And all of these will sparkle and they will shine and they'll bring things forward, kind of lighting your face with the word of God, if you want to think of it theologically as well. But there's another reason we chose to use gold, because we're not going to let go of that image of God. In the St. John's Bible, the 24-karat gold sparkles, but we also polish it. And what happens when you look at a polished surface? What do you see?
It
The
reflects.
reflection.
Yeah, and what's it going to reflect? Yeah, Julie's yeah, it's going to reflect you. And that's an important thing, because if we go back to scripture, it says we are all made in the image and likeness of God. So now whoever looks at this is going to see that image of God. They should see that which is a part of all of us. And I always like to point out that as you're looking at this, Kevin's leaning in right now. If I was looking over his shoulder and looking at him, I would not only see Kevin's face, but I would see my face. And if someone you don't like comes and looks over your shoulder, you're going to see his or her face too, which I always like to point out as well. That presence which is part of all of us as well. And so that idea of the reflective nature, God, is part of this as well. Imagine now being the artists and having to take these huge theological concepts and to make it into something that is about quality, longevity, very welcoming, but allowing you to be forward thinking as well. You would have looked at this by yourself, and if you studied it long enough, you could come up with some fascinating ideas. But the beauty of what we just did is looking at it together. And that's the nature of any art, and welcoming people into the conversation. So that's just the first page, folks. I mean, that's the very first page in the whole work. And it's pretty amazing. A work like this took between 4 to 8 months to do. And all these works began with theologians and artists and scholars at St. John's talking about it. And then they would send their notes over to Wales, because that's where Donald Jackson lives. And that's where the artistic team was housed. And the artists would start playing with ideas, reading the notes, and coming up with rough drafts. And eventually, they would show the rough drafts to this committee, and they would start to talk about it. And when both the committee and the artist said, you know what, this work is theologically and artistically sound, it is only then they would do it on vellum. 4 to 8 months times 160 artworks. You can see why this took 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
So now, let's take what you've learned with the creation story and apply it to another story. The nativity. We'll be dealing with the nativity in about 75 days, right around there. It'll be coming around the corner. And now that's a tough one. As an artist, if you're given the nativity story, that's the nativity right there, right? I mean, and if you say nativity, almost everyone's going to go to this nowadays, okay? So how do you get beyond this? Because you are now taking one of the most popular stories in the Bible, one of the most famous stories in the Bible, and one of the most opinionated stories in the Bible, just like creation, you know? So how do you take thinking of what we just learned with how we approached creation as artists? How would you approach the nativity? What could you do with it? Any ideas? What do you predict you will see? Thinking about the creation story, what do you predict you'll see?
Animals?
It would be hard not to have a creation story or a nativity story without animals in the Bible. I mean, come on, we all have to see that little donkey or that little sheep somehow. But what else might you do? What might you see?
Star?
Okay, all right. And the star is basically a source of what?
guidance. Light.
Ah, yes, light and guidance. So probably gonna see some light and guidance and some animals. What else might you do as an artist? What's always part of a nativity? You can't have a nativity without what?
Without Jesus?
Yes, you gotta have a baby Jesus,
baby.
right? And there you go. Well, what would be the most interesting thing you could think of to do to make a modern nativity?
Mm.
You've got a stumped, Tim.
Well, what if you left out the baby?
Mm.
How can you make a nativity story without the baby? Here is the nativity story in the St. John's Bible. Dramatically different than this.
Mhm.
What do you see?
Well, Julie was right. We see animals.
It also said you see light. Look at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, this is a beautiful image of the nativity, and it's a very simple nativity, but what you don't see is there's no baby.
Mhm.
But what do you see? And what will you see?
Light coming down in the center.
Yes, and that's a 24 karat polished gold band. What are you going to see in the nativity?
Yourself.
So,
Yes, because the incarnation is the past, the present, and the future. And so you're going to be part of that story as well. And it's just a very different look at the nativity. The story is all there. A couple of things I'd like to point out with this. There are some historical interesting things as well. You see the nativity, you see the beautiful crib, you see this heavy bull oxen figure. Well, that's the symbol of Luke's gospel, and this is from the Luke telling of the story. And that comes from a cave painting in France, the Lascaux cave paintings, a very famous one. We've taken that bull from those cave paintings, kind of as an image of the past. But take a look over here at the shepherds. When you look at this and you go in the gallery and look at this, you're going to notice our shepherds are women, children, and a family. At the time of Christ's birth, most of the shepherds would have been women and children. That's just a historical fact. It's even that way in the part of the world today. But how many of you have little nativity sets with little women and children shepherds at home in it? It's kind of interesting. So we have a shepherd family. Very well could have been there as well. So beautiful image, just a slight different look at how we might think of this, but bringing ourselves into this as well. So one last image before we move on to talking about the pages. So we've looked at creation. We've looked at the idea of nativity. Now let's take something a little simpler. Yes. I mean, think about how can you deal with the concept of hell? Be careful. Be careful with this one. Because for centuries, it was very clear what hell was going to look like. This is about the 1100. I love this image of hell because there is no questioning what's going on in this picture. And there's no question of who belongs in hell and what you need to do to get there. Simple as that, okay? Everything about this is very clear. So how do you deal with the idea of hell in the modern world? And what don't you want to see in the St. John's Bible hell image? What don't you want there to be?
Me.
Yes, you don't want a lot of gold in this one. Okay, you don't want to look at this and say, "Oh, I belong right there as well." So, the challenge. Exactly. That's right, exactly. So that becomes a challenge for this whole process. How do you create an image of hell in the modern world that doesn't say, "You belong there, you belong there, I don't belong there"? How do you not place people in hell, but still deal with this? Well, you can imagine our artists and theologians had quite a time with this one, but it turned out like this. Now, this is the confession of Peter. Upon this rock, I want you to build my church, and the gates of Hades will not prevail. That's a very bad paraphrase of it, but that's what this is. Now, this has two sides, the artwork. What do you see in the middle?
Gold.
Exactly. You see a personified figure of Christ. You see Christ presiding in the middle. If you look over here on the orange side, the place of Peter's confession, if you take a look at that, what do you look into it? What do you see? If you look into the artwork. Any ideas?
It looks
It's a
like
bit
they're
like a
alive.
face back there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There is a face. There's two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. It's a very stone-like face. It's basically the face of the image of Christ in the rock of the church, Peter in the rock of the church. If you knew what you were looking at, and if you knew St. John's better, you would recognize that that face and that stone-like appearance here is actually made out of the big Abbey bell banner that sits in front of our church.
Oh, wow.
The whole idea of the birth of the church, Christ on the rock of the church. You'll see up here golden scaffolding. You'll notice these little filigree elements. And you'll see them all over the St. John's Bible. That's a mathematical construct that is known as sacred geometry. And it goes back to that what Kevin said earlier in the creation story, when he talked about there's an underlying sense of order, a sense of logic. That's what these all represent, that underlying sense of order and logic in throughout all of creation science.
Mm.
So here you have this wonderful image of the warmth of the confession, the rock of Peter and the face of Peter and the rock of the church. And then Christ stands at the gates of Hades. So then we look at the other side of that image, the other half, and there are the gates of Hades. And I'm sure, Phil, you can read this word up here for us. That idea. Yes, exactly. The place of the dead, Sheol, place of the dead. But take a look. This is our image of hell. And thankfully, we don't see a lot of gold in there. but what do you see?
Well, I see I see a horse head
Yeah.
and then like a griffin.
Yes. Yeah. They based a lot of the imagery that surrounds this area here on polytheism. Donald Jackson went to the British Museum and looked at images from Babylon and Syria, and so on. And he wanted to see, when they were dreaming, what were the things they were seeing? And so he based their images of polytheism on their false idols and false gods and so on. But then there is this middle stuff right here. It kind of all surrounds it. Take a look at here. Does this look like anything to any of you? Let me zoom in on it. Have you ever seen anything like this before?
Is it bacteria?
Oh wow.
Oh.
That's powerful. Yeah. It happens to be a virus. Yeah. And take a
How
look
timely.
but take a look at the date. When this was created, it's 2002. Isn't that fascinating? When they did this image of hell, they didn't think of hell as a place. They were thinking of an experience of hell. And they kept thinking about isolation, darkness, loneliness, hell, and that idea that you're removed from God's presence, removed from community presence.
Mhm.
Boy, I would say I've heard people describe these last few months as hell-like for them. But I think this is kind of interesting. So this could be a virus. It could be Zika.
Mhm.
Could be coronavirus. Could be AIDS. Could be leprosy. Think of how people were treated in the early days of all of those.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you isolate them, you blame them, you get rid of them, you try to say it's their fault, whatever. That was a hell-like experience.
Mhm.
Okay? People still do that today. You know? And one woman looked at this in the gallery a few years ago and she said, no, a few weeks ago, and she said, this is not a virus, this is not Zika or anything. She said, that's hate, because hate spreads like a virus as well.
Mhm.
So again, they didn't want to go with what a place was, but that experience of hell. And there's how it looks all together. So once again, the St. John's Bible is not about making pictures of the stories. It's about creating a conversation that invites you to come together with others to make meaning. And they're very powerful experiences. So 160 artworks over the 1,130 pages, 1,130 pages that are filled with beautiful, beautiful pages of script. Script that is very easy to read. Here's a close-up of it. That is handwritten. The St. John's Bible was written by 6 different calligraphers, all working to make their hands look as much alike as possible. And like I told you earlier, go home, or stay at home, I should say, write one word and try to find 5 other people to write it the same way and see if you can do it.
Mhm.
It takes about 6 to 13 hours to write 1 page of text, and the 6 calligraphers worked for 7 years to write just the black lettering. If you add their time cards together, it's about 20 work years for one person. 20 work years to write just the black lettering, and that doesn't include any any artwork at all. And you'll see on the margins of some of the pages, just like in the medieval period, we place the plants and animals of the home of its commissioner. And so all across the sides, you're going to see plants and animals from central Minnesota. And we change all the amens to "yeah, sure, you betcha" for the whole Bible. Well, we're not changing a single word. We want to make sure that you know that this comes from central Minnesota as well. And I told you earlier that the use of the vellum allows us to be human, because you're bound to make a mistake. You're bound to spell this word wrong. And if you do, you're happy you're on vellum, because you take your knife, scrape it off, take your sandpaper and sand it off, and you'll never know it was there. However, sometimes you make a mistake that's too big to cover up, and then you turn it into something nice. Now, this beautiful page will be at the gallery. It's our sower in the seed. It's just a gorgeous piece done very traditionally, but when the calligrapher got to the bottom here, she discovered this column was one line longer than this column. She left out an entire line. And rather than fire her, Donald said, "We're going to fix this the way they did centuries ago." So as you read, you come down this column and you're reading away, and you hit a red diamond right there, or triangle right there. That triangle points back to the bird. The bird's feet are holding a rope. The rope travels down the side saying, "Oops, this forgotten line actually belongs right there." And the crowd came together again so that they could not even eat. When his family heard it, they went out to restrain him. Isn't that great? It's a legitimate way of fixing a mistake in a manuscript. They've done it that way for hundreds of years. Here is one of my favorites. This is from a book of hours in the 1300s. And this little monk is saying, "Sorry, folks, this line belongs right there." I always tell people that's the historical origin of cut and paste right there. Just take a look at it. It's a great piece. Out of 1,130 pages, we have 9 corrections. Here's one of my favorites. Look at the bumblebee. It's attached to a pulley saying, "Oops, this belongs up there." And I love this one. Our little lemur. With his eyes all bugged out saying, "What have I done?" All the way through. They're great. You know, there was discussion at the very beginning of the project that mistakes like this should be redone. The whole page should be redone. And it was one of our oldest monks that said, "No, let's take every chance to admit we're human." And so they did so 9 times, which is not too bad, not bad at all. So, well, to wrap up our time together today, I have one last page to show you that you will see in the Dixon exhibition. It's the beginning of the gospel book. It's the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew. And if any of you know the story of the Gospels and how Matthew begins, the very first passage in Matthew is the genealogy of Jesus. It's the most boring passage in the entire Bible. That's how it begins. It's this list of names that goes on and on and on and on. And how do you deal with that? How do you turn this list of names into something that draws people in and gives you a conversation? And here it is. This is how the gospel book begins. It's Christ's family tree. Take a look at it. Up here, it begins with Jesus in English and Hebrew. There they are. His family members, Mary, Joseph, English and Hebrew, other family members, all broken down in this family tree, all the way down to Abraham. But take a look at who else is listed. Sarah's on one side in English and Hebrew, but so is Hagar in English, Hebrew, and Arabic as the mother of Ishmael because of her leading to the Islamic nation. That's a beautiful image. Let's take a look at this. The rule of Benedict says you must welcome everyone, and even our things have to be welcoming. So take a look at this page. What strikes you? What do you see when you first see it? Let's look at it. My little panel over here. Anything strike you?
The circle in the kind of at the bottom, or I guess toward the bottom of the
Very
image,
much.
the concentric circles. Yeah.
Yep, very much so. In fact, the whole thing, what shape is this? Have you ever seen this kind of shape before?
Menorah?
Yeah, it's a menorah structure. The rule of Benedict says you welcome other people in. And so Christ was Jewish, so we have a menorah structure. His family tree is written on a menorah, but that menorah is lit with Islamic arabesques, a swirling mandala in the background, a Tibetan prayer wheel from Eastern traditions here, And they all come together to form a Christian cross over here. So what you end up having is an acknowledgement of three traditions: Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, all with that common root back to Abraham. But then there is one last thing. This is a Bible for the 21st century. So it has to deal with how we think about genealogy in the modern world. How do you scientifically know that you're related to your mother or father? Anyone have an idea?
From your DNA?
Yeah, exactly. Take a look. Zoom in and look at this very closely. Look between the branches of the menorah, and you will see golden DNA strands. Aren't they wonderful?
Wow.
And they are actually the entire background of the whole work. They're all over the place. Because what's the message? Of course, we believe that Christ was divine, all the gold, but also that Christ was human. And what's more human than our DNA? All with that common root all the way back. Well, you've been a very gracious audience to spend with me today, because the St. John's Bible is a stunning work that invites you to come together with others. It began in 1995, and it was actually finished on May 9th, 2011, almost 15 years. And the St. John's Bible is finished, but it's not yet bound. It's being kept unbound so that we can take it to museums all over the country. And when you come to the Dixon, you will not see just a little book. You will not see just one book. You will see the folios of the Bible placed in cases. So here's our creation page, which allows you to think of it almost as if you're looking at multiple books on like easels or book stands. And you can get so close and personal as if you're reading a book on that reading stand. It's a very unique way of experiencing and moving into the gallery. Now, I will take a few minutes of questions if there are anyone that has any questions before I wrap up and say goodbye to you.
There are a few questions.
Great.
We'll start with question I have. And you showed the materials in the beginning that you use the candle soot for the black, and lapis, and I've forgotten what else you said for the colors. But did you choose those colors because they were the colors you wanted, or because they were the materials that were going to last the next couple of thousand years? So how was your palette chosen?
For the writing base, those are the traditional colors of ink: the black, the reds, the blues, and the greens. And that's really what dictated that, and that's what's available in those natural elements. The artwork, they use casein, which is a protein-based paint, and gouache, which is that dense watercolor, and there's a tiny, tiny bit of acrylic on some of the plants and animals. And so the text was dictated by tradition, the artworks by what's available, and by longevity.
Okay, thank you. And Phil has a question. Will a smaller version ever be done for mass production?
Well, since you've asked, right there it is. Oh, that question gets asked every single time. We're always asked, how can I see it? How can I have it? Because most of us aren't going to get to Minnesota. Many people can't even get to the gallery at Memphis right now. But yes, every single page has been digitized. The very first thing that happened when I brought the pages back from Wales was they were given 24 hours to acclimate, and then we digitized them. And that digitization allows us then to have a copy if we ever burn down or lose it, but it also allows then you to have a book, have it in, for lack of a better word, coffee table size version. So yes, it's all available, and I think even the Dixon is carrying some of those and selling them in your little gift area as well. There are 7 volumes, so 7 books like this, because again, if you put them into one book, your book could be about that thick and wouldn't be very structurally sound. But there, yes, so it is available. Like I said,
Great.
always that question gets asked.
Well, thanks for making that available.
Yeah.
Margarita Sandino would like to know if the current Pope has ever seen the Bible.
We are on our 3rd Pope already. Though when we started this project, it was John Paul II that gave the blessing for us to go ahead and do it. We did not need his permission because we're not retranslating the Bible. But of course, we're Roman Catholic, so we gotta ask Papa. So John Paul said yes. Then Benedict, the second Pope, was involved, and he received a copy of the last part of it. And then Pope Francis, excuse me, saw it. And actually Pope Francis gave a full-size copy of the St. John's Bible to the American people, and it's housed in the Library of Congress. So I'm on my third Pope as we go all the way.
Well, Drew Thomas has a very good question. Could you talk about the daily workflow? If all the scribes and artists live in different locations, how often and far were the pages traveling between scribes and artists? How were they transported?
Good questions, all of them. The St. John's Bible, the commissioners are in Minnesota, like I showed you on the map. Donald Jackson's scriptorium is in Monmouth, Wales. All the scribes were in the United Kingdom. 4 of them were in Wales, 1 was in London, 1 was in Scotland. The scribes would come together every 6 weeks to compare their hands and to pick up their allocation of skins. And they would travel to the scriptorium in Wales to actually pick up their skins and take them back on their own. They would take them to their home studios, or 3 of them worked with Donald in his studio. And then every 6 weeks, they would come back and compare hands and make sure that no one was getting too fancy or doing things, because they wanted their script to all look the same. The script of the St. John's Bible was designed by Donald Jackson to be very easy to read, but also to be elegant enough to be for the Bible. The artworks were done by artists in various parts of the world, and when they were ready, those pages were rolled up just like this, put into a tube, and sent FedEx. And the artist said, we're going to do it that way because if it gets lost or damaged, we can recreate a new one. When I went to pick them up in Wales, I went with special security boxes. They were packed very carefully, very tightly in compression folders. I had an escort to the airport, went through special security. The Bible flew in the first class compartment on the airplane jet, and the pilot and co-pilot carried it off. So, because if I got damaged, I couldn't recreate the new one. So once we took it over, they began being treated like fine art. But when they were in creation, they were flying over our heads at any point in time. So kind of fascinating story. Any other? We'll take one more question.
Okay, well, those of us in Memphis like hearing about FedEx.
I never thought of that. Yes, FedEx and Delta Airlines was our partner.
Okay, I've got 2 last questions. So
okay, we'll take them both.
maybe we can take 2 if you're feeling that generous.
Fine.
First, Diane Callahan has one about the funding. Since Donald Jackson's involved with the royal family, she wanted to know if the Queen had anything to do with funding this.
Oh, wouldn't that have been nice if she would have just opened her checkbook, written us a couple of things? No, and actually we would not have wanted that. We went to one family at the beginning of this project and said, would you give us X amount of dollars and commission the whole thing? And the family said, I could, and I think it's a great idea, but I'm not going to, because this can't be the Tim Ternes Bible or the whatever Bible. It has to be communal. And so that person gave us some seed money and said, now you use that and find other people to support it. In the end, it was paid for by about 1,400 individual donations. Wow. Donations from as small as a group of Boy Scouts in Minneapolis that gave us $5.36 to a couple of families that gave us each $1 million. And so in that same vein, it became a communal project as well. So it really was an amazing undertaking. Made it a lot more work on our end, trust me, but that's how it was. So unfortunately, Elizabeth did not give us anything, but she has seen it. Or no, Charles has seen it, excuse me. Elizabeth has not seen it, Charles has seen it, excuse me.
Well, our last question is from Julie Parati. Oh. And so her question is, were the students at St. John's aware of this project as it was being worked on and after it was completed?
They could not be aware of it because we had Good Morning America filmed in the middle of the campus one day at the whole start of this. We had a BBC crew doing a documentary on part of it as well. In the early 2000s when it started, it was because they began writing on Ash Wednesday of the year 2000. And then every few years, a volume was delivered and it was always a big deal. So yes, the students were very aware. Donald came and did some speaking to the students and things every once in a while. The gallery that we have there now makes it part of every class. All of our theology classes are taught with the St. John's Bible. I do presentations and things. So yes, it has a presence on the campus, but we're always amazed. Now, every once in a while, we'll meet a student and say, what do you think of the St. John's Bible? And they'll go, oh, I never even heard of it. So, you know, no matter how hard you work, you're always going to miss one or two as you go all the way. But yes, it does have a presence on the campus as we go through. So I hope you will take time to tell your friends, but more importantly, to come and see it yourself, because you have a rare opportunity. Historians have looked at the St. John's Bible, and this was not something that we said. This was said independently by about 4 or 5 different historians several years ago. When they looked at the project and they said, an undertaking of this scale has not been taken on in the world. A commission like this has not been done in our world since the Sistine Chapel was commissioned. Now think about that. And they said, that's the scale of this, the number of years, the magnitude of how much money it cost and everything. It was an expensive project. And think about that. Centuries ago, when they walked into the Sistine Chapel and looked up and saw, wow, that's amazing. Did they have any clue what they were looking at? The longevity of that and how it would become so world-renowned? Well, you are living in the time of the creation of one of the next ones. And the Dixon has been smart enough to bring it to you, so you be smart enough to come and see it. Simple as all I can say. And so thank you to the Dixon and all the staff. You have been a delight to work with. And as I said earlier, this will be the first exhibition where I didn't come in person to open it. And so I've given you my cows, and now you have to take care of the herd so they can come back and see me, because we do want them back, but we're very happy to have you have them there. The Dixon exhibition is open until January 11th, and you have the opportunity to see 70 pages. Even if you come to Minnesota, you can only see 28. So you can see more in Memphis than you can in its own home. And I show you this last image, which is one of my favorites. You'll see this one in the gallery. It's an image of our world from outer space. The last time a monastery commissioned a work like this was over 500 years ago. And trust me, we now know why. We'll never do this again. But we're very happy with the fact that we did it. But 500 years ago, this image could never have existed in a Bible. And so as we look at this lasting 500, 2,000 years, you got to wonder, what will this phrase mean then? Thank you for your time this afternoon. Thank you for your interest, and thank you to the Dixon for bringing the Bible and me with you today. If you want any more information, don't hesitate to visit our website or feel free to send me an email. And now, go to the Dixon. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
You know,
Thank you so much. Oh,
wonderful.
thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Julie.
Julie, thank you. That was so great.
That was awesome.
Kevin, y'all are just wonderful to have brought that. Oh, this is the best.
Oh, we love it.
Mm-hmm.
And Tim is just such a great steward
Oh
for
my
this
gosh.
project. I mean, I haven't given up on the idea of you coming to Memphis. So
I'll be back. I want to come in January when it's cold here.
might be the perfect time.
Exactly.
Oh,
Thanks,
absolutely.
everyone.
Thank you. When I leave the meeting, it's going to shut for everybody. That's why I'm
Okay.
holding on here. So, but it'll shut down for everyone. But
We
what's
don't
that?
want to let you go. If you don't.
Pardon?
We don't want to let you go.
I can stick around if anyone wants to have any other questions for a few minutes yet. You don't want to keep the Dixon.
Well, we just got Laurie Stanton saying fascinating, thank you, and things got in my way on my computer, and Donald Batchelor saying applause, kudos. So
I do have, there's a question that says, what was the overall cost? We're often asked that question, and I always answer it this way. We just built a new stadium, the new sports stadium for $1.3 billion in Minneapolis.
Oh my.
And that'll last about 30 years. Okay? We did a Bible for a few million that'll last 2,000 years. So do the math. So do the math. As simple as that. It was a multi-million-dollar project. It was expensive.
Golly.
We need
But
you in charge of the federal budget.
Trust me, after managing 23 artists and 160 monks for 15 years, I can do anything.
Yeah.
When they hired me, I was a 5th grade teacher.
Wow.
I had spent 17 years teaching 5th grade, and I told them that. And they said, why should we hire you? And I said, because I've spent the last 15 years doing things with 30 5th graders following me no matter what I did. And I can manage this.
And you've paid your dues, 5th graders? Holy smokes, you can do anything.
Oh no, I loved those years. I don't miss them, but I loved those years. I'm glad they're behind me. But it was a perfect proving ground for working with my group here. So
That's so great.
Well, Tim, we really hope you can come see the show because it looks, Barbara has gotten a sneak peek of it, and it looks amazing. I'm just really pleased. And, you know, as you were saying, the reflective quality of the gold, that is real. Like in the galleries, you can really stand in front of it, and it's so bright, and it really illuminates.
The bad thing is because there is a glass barrier between you, you don't get to see your face like you when it's not there. But trust me, it's there. It's really cute. Well, so anyway. Well, thank you all very much. So,
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
have a good afternoon.
Wonderful.
Bye
Have
now.
a great day. Bye.
Yeah,
everybody.
you too. Take care.
Bye.